Welcome, everyone. My name is Libby Murray, and I want to thank you for joining Lifetime's Adoption Q&A webinar tonight. And joining me is Lifetime's director and longtime staff. I know she's worn many hats, and I'm excited to have her here as my co-host tonight. Heather Featherston is joining us to help us talk about open adoption. Heather, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. This is a topic that actually both of us talk about very regularly. So I'm happy to answer questions and actually just kind of have some discussion around these topics. I know a lot of times when families are just starting adoption, starting the research process, starting to learn a little more about what adoption looks like today, open adoption, they start realizing that's kind of the norm now for domestic adoption. And that kind of brings up a lot of questions. So I'm, like I say, excited to be here and get some of those questions and share some answers from my experience, and I know you will from your experience also.
Absolutely. And before we get started, I just want to review how you can reach out to Lifetime, whether you're on the call and you've never heard of Lifetime Adoption before and you're just exploring not only this webinar and the content, but just maybe you're starting to think about who can help me adopt. I want to say welcome, and then if you're on the call and you have maybe been well entrenched in the process already and you're one of Lifetime's currently waiting families, or if you're one of the families on the call tonight who is in the middle of maybe walking through applying with Lifetime or getting some of the details in a row to begin Lifetime's program for your own adoption journey, I'm just so glad to see all of you here. And as a reminder, just know that we are here for you and happy to answer questions one-on-one too. So if anything leaves you fuzzy with this webinar, or if you need more clarity, or if you need more information, or you want to know about the steps to actually get into our program and what you can expect specifically with your adoption goals within Lifetime's program, please call us Monday through Friday, 1-800-923-6784. You can also email if you're more comfortable starting that way, or shooting your coordinator an email is always a good start. But if you don't yet have a Lifetime coordinator, you can write to adopt@lifetimeadoption.com. And then, of course, you can apply free if you're joining us for the first time ever and you haven't yet applied. Lifetimeadoption.com/apply will take you right there. And then I have loved seeing some of the community and the conversations going on Facebook, and you can find our page at facebook.com/open.adoption. So let's get started. Again, I do want to encourage all of you to participate, and what I mean by that is if you have a question that comes to mind, don't hesitate to ask. And if it's something that maybe relates more specifically to your adoption, we might direct you to someone who could help you better within our program, or you could always follow up later if we're not able to touch on it on air tonight. But in particular, like Heather said, these days there is still a lot of stereotype, a lot of misunderstanding about what open adoption is like. And I think, too, we were talking about our experiences, and just probably all of you in the audience tonight, you might know at least one person in your life who is touched by adoption, whether they are an adoptive parent or they were adopted, maybe they're a birth parent. But those of us in the audience who are of, child-raising age, anywhere from your 20s through 40s, maybe 50s, we have a wide gamut of people joining us here tonight. We still all know a lot of people from the old days of adoption. And so when it comes to this concept of open adoption, some people get easily confused. And what we want to do is shed some light on some of the common questions that we hear from adopting parents who contact us when it comes to open adoption and trying to understand this concept. But also, we want to hear from you. So if we're talking about something and you either have a question or you have experience to share, type it in that questions box so that we can either share it with the audience and help them understand better, or get you the information you need. So Heather, I'm going to bring up our first slide here, and if you're joining us online, you'll be able to see some of the photos and the information we've put together for visuals. But if you can't see your screen, don't worry, because we'll have plenty to talk about, and you'll walk away with lots of tips and insights. So the first question, because I think this ties in well with where adoption has grown, how it's changed over the years. And this question says, why do birth mothers get to pick the adoptive parents? And Heather, I know that you've heard this question when you used to work with families one-on-one in that exploratory phase. What is it that first comes to mind when you think of how to answer and how to best explain why open adoption allows a birth mother to choose the adoptive parents for her baby?
You know, that's something that actually comes as a surprise to some families who are just starting the adoption process today. In the, say, the 50s, even back, you think of the movie and the musical Little Orphan Annie. Those were the days when parents would go into, adoptive parents would go into orphanages and literally pick the child out of a line of children. With more of the delivery, there were a lot more women placing for adoption. So if you were waiting in the process, you might get a lot of opportunities to kind of pick and choose. That is totally opposite today. Today, with open adoption, the birth mother wants to choose in most cases because she wants to have a say in who's raising her child. She wants a family with certain characteristics. She wants a family she can get to know and build a relationship with. Now, I'm saying that not every birth mother may want those things, but this is kind of in general what we see at Lifetime. So adoption in general is considered, open adoption is considered far healthier for not only the child, but also the birth parents and the adopting parents. And letting the birth mother choose, that gives her, obviously it gives her more control in the situation. It also gives her the opportunity to really start having, making a plan for her child, choosing the life and the parents that she has in her mind's eye for the child. And what that does for you as an adoptive parent is it gives you the opportunity to know that you are being chosen. You are being valued. You are being selected for what you have to offer. And your child's family, you know, you're chosen. You're special. You are exactly what they want, which usually is the sign of a very good match, a very successful adoption, and it also sets the stage for the contact and relationship you will have down the road. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the call, but because you come together for the best of this child, it really is the start of a relationship that truly is more people to love our children. And
you know, Heather, what comes to my mind too is you started with talking about the old days, which if any of you ever get kind of nerdy curious about the history of adoption and some of the terms that have changed over the years and why we do or don't say certain things a certain way, you know, it's really fascinating just to see how our culture has grown through adoption. Because it's really an age-old concept, an age-old practice. But things have changed because there are benefits that we see now that maybe people didn't know about then or they weren't willing to embrace then. And I know you brought up it's good for all sides, Heather, and I just wanted to say that is definitely something, too, that Lifetime can walk through with you and help you better understand. You know, we even did a webinar about the benefits of adoption, and we talked about those different parties involved. But what comes to mind is that visual you had of the old orphanage days. And I just think time to time, now we have a thing that we like to say, to choose you. and change your life, to start your adoption. Time to time, we have been faced with the rare occasion where maybe two birth mothers may choose the same family at the same time, just coincidentally. And it's an impossible choice to imagine telling one woman no and one woman yes.
Especially because you, with Lifetime at least, it's a situation where you do need to tell one woman no so she can choose another family and begin that relationship. And a lot of families feel like, well, what if I pick the wrong one? What if the one I pick doesn't follow through with it?
Which is a really good, it's a good question, and we do have, we will be able to talk about some of the fears that come along with open adoption. But as you were going on, it just made me think, Heather, you know, I read something recently from the perspective of a birth mother, and she had written a letter to the family she did not choose for her baby. And it was almost overwhelming. Like, it was such a heartfelt letter because she didn't choose one family because maybe they were better than another family. She chose them because they were the right fit for the right reasons, for the reasons she was looking for. But one thing that always stood out to me after I read that was how she said almost what a burden it was to know that she had control like that, to choose one family for her baby. And I think, you know, wouldn't it be better that she have that control rather than for her or for a child to continue to feel picked over, you know, when she's in such a fragile state, for her to have the ability to maybe get a little bit of control back into her circumstances and her situation and actually get to give her baby parents, which is why I love this comment from adoptive dad Jake, who actually posted this on our Facebook just this week. This was in response to a different post where we were talking about, you know, why we don't look at adoption as giving a baby away, and certainly adoption offers you, through open adoption, the chance to give your baby something, give your baby a family, give your baby a future that maybe you're not able to provide. And so what he wrote here was a perspective that I think that we've circled around a lot, but we haven't always addressed it specifically. And he said, you can choose to grow your family by adding another family, as in adding adoptive parents, adding another family to help you give your child the best life possible. There is a family out there that has your wishes and your desires in their heart, just as they do for your child. Now, he says, creating an open partnership in raising children is something that is available in the right situations and can be created by compassionate and loving people. And I just want to highlight on that, he doesn't mean, you know, a co-parenting, joint custody type of situation. He means open adoption gives a woman the ability to provide for her child by giving parents who can do that for her. So when she has in mind, you know, an example here, Heather, we can talk about some of the situations, some of these women who call us and the requests they have, you know, that sometimes they will say, maybe I would love for my child to grow up with pets, and I live in an apartment on my mom's couch, and there's no way I'm ever going to, you know, live anywhere with a yard where I can have a dog, you know. Or maybe she has a certain faith, you know, and she wants her child to grow up in the same church environment that she grew up in. Or a stay-at-home mom, or a mother that's a teacher, or a nurse, or anything. Think of anything that she might want to give to her child that she's not able to at the time when she is facing this adoption decision. And she's able to give that to her child through you, through the adoptive parents she picks. And so what I love about this...
I remember a birth mom a few years ago who wanted to place, it was two children she wanted to place because she wanted them to have more family. It was just her. There was no father. There was no, her parents were gone. It was just her, and she wanted her children to have grandparents and cousins and not have this solo, alone existence that the three of them had. So it may be specific things like Libby mentioned, or it may just be general things that, to be honest, most of us are blessed to have.
Right. Well, or a common one that we hear is financial stability. A lot of these women, sometimes the question comes up, well, why doesn't her family help her raise this baby? And granted, a lot of you on the call might not necessarily be asking that, but people around her are. And she might be thinking, well, because my mom's living on stamps and I'm in and out of work. I can't hold a job, and the economy, it's so hard to find a job in the first place. And I can't afford daycare on top of part-time work and helping with rent or food or whatever doesn't get filled in by public assistance. She can't always offer that, and sometimes she wants to break out of that cycle too. So there may even be personal goals that she has in mind, that she's choosing you not only for her child, but sometimes you may find that you end up as a role model. And if you're looking at this photo on the screen right here, this is Jake and Tanya in the middle, and those are the adoptive parents. And they adopted through Lifetime twice, their little son Connor and their daughter Cassidy, and each child's birth mother is on either side of them. So Connor's birth mother is on the side next to Jake there on the left, and Cassidy's birth mother is on the right. And this was actually, and we'll get to this question too, because I actually had this, Heather, and I think it's worth touching on. But this was actually a family reunion that Jake and Tanya had with their whole family. And they just have a personal connection with these two women in their lives, and so they offered, do you want to come to our family reunion? And they said yes. And then it was an even greater blessing just to see these two birth mothers actually meet each other and connect and be a support and a peer for each other too. But when you ask Jake or Tanya about, how did the other family react to having these two women there, they were embraced. Everybody loves them. It's not a big secret about who they are, and nobody's tiptoeing around like, oh, what if I say the wrong thing? Because they have built a very personal relationship. Now, their situation may be very unusual to a lot of people who just have sort of a extended family-like relationship where maybe they only talk a few times a year or share updates, on a regular monthly basis, but it's not this personal talking, getting together, sharing meals kind of situation. Every open adoption is so different. But what happens here is that it was the right fit for all of them. So not only did they get to choose Jake and Tanya for each of these children, but they got to choose how they wanted that relationship to look. But Jake and Tanya got to choose how they wanted that relationship to look too.
Right.
So, and we had, let's see here. I had a couple questions come in. I want to make sure we didn't miss these here. Now, Heather, when you're talking about open adoption, what would you say is more of a common situation that you see? Because there can be a lot of confusion just about what open adoption is, period. And then sometimes it gets even more confusing because people want to put labels and boxes around these certain types of adoptions. Like, wouldn't you say most adoptions, it's open because, first of all, she gets to choose the family for her baby. She knows where her baby goes.
Yeah, that's, and that's one of the things people want to ask, well, what's the difference between open and closed adoption? Closed adoption is typically something we no longer see in domestic adoptions here. Closed adoption is when the baby goes to the agency picks the family. There's no connection, there's no choosing, there's no nothing. And if many times the family doesn't even have that information. And if you want that when the child's 18, sometimes you might get those records. That is really, really not done in this country anymore. It is occasionally, but it's usually by the birth mother's request. Some foster adoptions are closed adoptions, but again, that's a whole nother subject as well. Open adoption means the birth mother has the choices. She can choose the family. She can choose to have ongoing contact if she wants.
She can choose, she can make a birth plan for the hospital, just like any pregnant woman in this country can do. She can choose who cuts the cord. I mean, she has control and she has choices. One thing to know is it is every bit as legally binding as a closed adoption. It is an adoption. It is final. A lot of people are worried, or a lot of adoptive parents tend to get worried that it means it makes it easier for her to come back and change her mind. The reality is, in any adoption, a birth mother has a set period of time to change her mind. When you are in a match with a birth mom and speaking with an attorney, you will know what that time frame is. And just briefly, that time frame depends on state law, your state, and birth mother state. But you will know how long that is. Once that time frame has passed, provided that you have a qualified adoption attorney who's done everything by the legal rules, she can't change her mind. She can't. There are some states that time frame is immediate once she lifts the pen off the paper. There's other states that it can be up to 30 days. But whether your adoption is open or closed, she still is going to have a time frame if those rules, that's the legal process that's taking place. A real common myth is that open adoption means the birth mom can come back later on, like she can come back in 6 years and change her mind. And it's easier because she knows who you are. Legally, she can't do that.
Bottom line of this question usually, when we pose this second question here that says, does open adoption make it easier for her to change her mind? That's usually the underlying fear, is that if I keep in touch with her, is she going to interrupt this life and this routine and this family that has been living as one?
Yeah. And the answer is no. The answer is actually the opposite. What she has gained from open adoption is this. She has gained the peace of mind knowing that her child is in a loving, safe home that she chose. She gained the ability to see how her child is growing and developing, happy and healthy and safe, and enjoying the childhood she wanted her child to have. She gained a relationship with you. Now that relationship can be like as we just said, it can be something that is not quite so open. Maybe you really love each other twice a year. But she gained accepts her. Whatever format that is, she knows that she's accepted by you. And even for families who come into open adoption literally scared half to death of it, usually they come out on the other side saying, I never knew I could care for our child's birth mother so much. She's given us so much to have her in our lives. And I'll tell you why that is. That is because most people come into adoption with a belief of what a birth mother is like. They come in thinking that she may be using drugs, that she may be being forced to do this, that she wants a lot of money out of a family for her baby. And they're pleasantly surprised to find that these are women who are making this choice for their child in spite of the fact that many of their people in their lives are saying, yeah, no, you should keep your baby. Come on, it'll be fun. I'll help you out. We'll buy lots of clothes. It'll be fun. Well, most women are choosing adoption even though they don't have a lot of people in their lives who support that decision. So when you kind of start to put this picture together of these are women who want a better life for their child, suddenly you can start seeing how, okay, she's not going to come back and try to change her mind 6 years from now, because this is the life she chose. She had a say. And I think it's safe to say that with all of us, when we can make decisions that affect us, we're a little more committed to seeing positive and
and hopefully beneficial results.
You know, and as I think about this question and the answer you just shared, and I think about my work with these birth mothers, especially when I'm taking their initial phone call to learn more about adoption. You know, like all of you, most birth mothers are not aware of what open adoption is. So they are also in the stage like you're in where they're preparing and learning more about it and what to expect and you know, what's usual, what's common, how much it's changed, because she probably also doesn't know a lot of people very familiar with the concept of open adoption. But one thing that I always think of, especially when a birth mother will ask me, you know, well, can I change my mind? And this talks, you know, it's actually good that she's thinking about that. It's good that she's thinking, can I go through with this? Is this what I really want to do for my baby? And she's actually sorting out, you know, the pros and cons of choosing adoption versus raising her baby herself. And when she asks me that, I will tell her about women that I've worked with who have changed their minds. And it's a very difficult decision for them to change their minds, because by the time that they've already chosen you, they've gotten to know you some. And these women never take it lightly. So in the times when she may decide within that period of time that she has to change her mind, now we're going down to, you know, those days, maybe a week, whatever it is in your state, the adoption laws present with your match will determine that. But if she's in that time frame and she decides, I just can't go through with this, it's hard for her because she also has come to like you and maybe even love you and care about your desire to be parents too. And I always imagine this woman who had one plan. You know, most of us, I would say, are not super easygoing when it comes to a change of plans. And so here she was planning all along not to bring this baby home. She didn't maybe prepare to get a car seat or a crib or diapers or bottle feeding, clothes, any of that. And you're there prepared, and she's thinking, I don't know if I can go through with this. She's not going to take it lightly when she says, I've changed my mind, because she also knows now she has to get a plan together in a flash. And it's not a personal rejection of you. It's not like you did something and she says, you don't deserve my baby. It's just that it's her personal choice. But when she has that freedom to decide, I've actually seen more women with sort of a weight lifted off their chest because they don't feel forced. They don't feel like, I have to do this because I already talked to this family. I have to do this because I already called for information. She knows moving forward, every step is her choice to stay on that path. And so when people feel like that, it's empowering. When we feel like we actually get a say in what's happening to us, we feel more equipped and more courage and more ability to actually keep doing that and pursuing what we want to happen. And you have to imagine in her situation that she's probably facing circumstances she never imagined she'd be in. And that's not always dire or detrimental, but you know, most women don't grow up thinking, I'm going to get pregnant with a child that I'm not able to raise. But here she's facing a positive option to give her the ability to provide for that baby in a different way than raising that baby herself. But choosing adoption is as much about giving something to her baby as it is giving something to herself, because she's able now to decide, what do I want for my future? And so when she is allowed to choose whether or not to make this happen, it lightens her load. And also, I want to say, you know, going back to the first question and then with this question, you know, open adoption, in my experience, actually reduces the chances that she's going to change her mind, because she actually gets to know you and build a trust with you. And in those moments when it's hard, she can think back, but they've been there for me, and they actually seem to really care about me. I don't think they're just doing lip service. I don't think they're just telling me what I want to hear to get what they want. I think they're actually sincere, and that she actually is sometimes and usually very excited for you to welcome her baby. And so all of that, even in her head, she probably still has to answer to herself again, do I want to do this? She's able to look at all of those positives around her too and think, maybe this is the first time ever I've made a constructive and positive choice under hard circumstances. It's confidence building. But you can look at your screen right here and see a picture of Chloe and Heather, and they shared their story earlier this summer. But it's beautiful to see how personal it is to them and how much they care about each other. It's not just how much Heather cares about her son's birth mother, Chloe. Chloe cares about her son's family. And they've just continued to grow a friendship. So it was very personal between them. But even Chloe said in her interview, she never imagined it would be like this. So just being, even just a birth mother being open to having an open adoption was beyond her expectations.
Definitely.
Let's see, and we've had some questions come in, and I just want to say, if it's not related to open adoption, we may not be able to get to that on this webinar, but we are happy to answer that for you. So feel free to type your questions in, and we can make sure you get to the person who can get that information for you. And we're also trying to type behind the scenes with some of you too. So, so keep participating, and we'll try and keep up. Let's see here.
I just want to share one comment that just came in from Becky, and that was, we are going through that right now where our birth mother and I have established that bond, and I'm very grateful for that. So thanks for sharing that. And it is. That's one of the reasons why in these webinars we like to use photos and tell stories, because it is. This is what is happening every day, and you don't see a lot of beautiful, healthy, open adoption stories on TV because there's not a lot of drama. I mean, there's a lot of drama sometimes at the beginning when you're worried and you're a little fearful, but they just happen beautifully, and the relationships can really be a gift, and for many families, it's a gift you weren't expecting.
And we talk a lot in most of our adoption Q&A webinars about just how different that relationship could look for everyone, whether it's through an adoption story or just answering it from our experience. What you have to keep in mind is that most matches, at least within our program, most of the time you're going to have a little bit of time to sort of sort through some of those questions, and that's also what you are, in our program, the kind of support that we're not only offering to the birth mother but also to the adoptive parents through that match, so that if there are questions, maybe you don't know how to navigate a certain conversation, or you have a question in mind but you're not sure if you should ask it or how to make sense of the answer that birth mother shared, that we're also there because we've also been working with her. And sometimes she may have questions, and she might think, I don't know if it was appropriate to ask them, but I was really curious, what he did for a living. There could be things that she's just curious to get a better picture of who you are, and we can help that relationship unfold. So just to kind of set you all a little bit on ease is to know that she's also as nervous as you are to talk with her. I mean, essentially you're strangers going off of some basic knowledge that, in a sense, you learn a lot about each other before you even talk the first time, but you're still strangers talking, and anyone would be nervous. I mean, you care. You care about this conversation, so it's normal to feel a little bit like, I just don't even know how I would handle that. But she feels like that too, but then it is so common the next day for us to hear back from both sides, you and that birth mother. Oh, it's a little nervous at first, but we talked for over an hour. Sometimes they even talked for 2 or 3 hours, and she was funny, and he was quick-witted, or he was so sweet, and he didn't want to push, so I just kept sharing information, and she just kept asking me how I was doing, and I just really got this sense that they actually care and they're excited about this baby, and then we hear from the adoptive parents, she was smart, she was so sweet and funny, just the reaction is priceless. We just eat that up because to us, that's what we see happening every day. When you see these photos on the screen, when you see and hear adoption stories, it's because while every story is different and they are as individual as you are, as that birth mother is, it's just we know how possible it is to have a beautiful connection together. So, just be reassured that she's nervous too, but that you keep moving forward as, polite, mature adults, and you have conversations about what you see in this adoption's future for this child and between each other. Heather, I want to move on to the next slide here. I'm going to bring this up. And this is a very common question that we get when it comes to an open adoption, particularly where there's maybe contact after, maybe even visits. Another common question we get is, what does it mean to have visits with your child's birth mother later? And so we can talk a little bit about that. But this question is open adoption confusing for the child? Will I ever be or feel like the mom or the dad?
Yeah, that's really common, and in fact, it's really common to assume that it is confusing for a child. But let me explain why it actually is not. If you think of, we'll go back to kind of the 50s, the closed adoption period. What was traditional to happen was when a child was between the ages of 10 and 13 or so, your adoptive parents would sit down and have a very serious time, a very serious conversation with you, and say, son, we have something to tell you. We know you thought we were your parents all these years, but we're not. I mean, wow. I mean, that is something that shook many children to their core, something that they believed, that they assumed, that they always thought was true from their earliest remembrance, now you're saying isn't true. Now, today in open adoption, what happens is, at Lifetime, we encourage families to begin talking to your baby about this. And we encourage you to begin talking to your baby because it makes it, you get to practice what you say. To share with that baby that you are chosen. You didn't grow in my tummy, but we love you. You grew in our hearts. We prayed for you long before you were ever conceived, before you were born, before we even knew who you were. We were praying for you. You are an answer to prayer. You have a birth mother who chose us to be your mommy and daddy. She loves you. She's in contact with us. These are things you say from the beginning. If you have a relationship with the birth mother that involves visits, like Jake and Tanya we saw earlier, the child starts to know their birth mother. Often, many times, families have a special name for her. It may be my birth mom. It may be my tummy mommy. It may be, Auntie Sue. It may be a special, but it's someone that they know. And you grow from your earliest remembrance of having this understanding that your tummy mommy picked mom and dad to be my parents. And it's not weird, it's not strange, it's not life-shattering because it's what you've always known. There's no worry, there's no question. At 12 years old, when the parents sat you down, the first thought was usually, why? Why didn't she want me? Why did they give me away? This doesn't happen with open adoption. A child knows. Now, you may tell your child age-appropriate things, and there may be a time when your child's older that you say, we do want you to know the full truth of your medical history. That's not a burden a child necessarily has to carry when they're 6. But, when they're older and looking at their own lives, sometimes then it's good to give some more of that information. But it's not confusing for a child because a child knows the truth. And when you know the truth from the beginning, that's your normal. That's absolutely your normal. There have been a few things on Facebook lately because of some of the domestic violence things in the news, And we've had some conversations about, why do women stay in these abusive relationships? Well, if you were raised in an abusive home, that's all you know. To you, that's normal. If your dad hit your mom, that's normal. So in a much better way, with open adoption, when a child knows this from the beginning, it's normal. It's not weird. In fact, we've had families call us, ask us, I'm really struggling with something. Can you help me out? And I say, sure, I'm happy to. Well, our biological daughter is really upset that she doesn't have a birth mom like our adopted son does. What do we tell our biological daughter about why she doesn't have these extra people? So again, in families, the dynamics sometimes get, I don't want to say a little comical, but they get a little lighthearted when your biological children are feeling left out because they don't have birth parents.
Right.
It just has to do with explaining to your child exactly what adoption is, and especially what open adoption is. It's more people to love our children. And you will feel like mom and dad because you know what? You are mom and dad. You are absolutely every bit as legal mother and father as any mother and father who have a biological child.
Absolutely, and that's what stood out to me when we put some of these photos together, Heather, was that to me, when we look at these images, we think there's no doubt in my mind that they feel like mom and dad, that they are mom and dad. Another question we have sometimes is, if I have an open adoption, does that mean she gets a say in how I raise my child, such as vaccinations or the type of school I put my child in or how to discipline? Or, another fear that happens is, what if my child is 12 or 14 or 16 and says, I know who my birth mom is, and she would let me stay out past 10, so I'm going to go stay with her. Well, no, that doesn't happen. You would handle that the same way as if your child, biological or adopted, came to you and said, well, my best friend's mom said I could live with her, and she lets us stay out past 10. You would say, well, she's not your mother, and you live in my house, and I'm responsible for you. I am your mom. So, and to go back to that topic, too, that was actually something that we talked about in Tammy's story earlier this year. We got to hear from a birth mother who has walked through 18 years of open adoption, and her son knows who she is, and that she even herself, had those thoughts once in a while, like, well, what if he becomes a teenager and says, well, I'm going to go live with Tammy? Tammy said, I would say, you need to talk to your parents. Yeah. So she's recognizing you're the parents. Again, we're going back to, she's choosing you to raise her baby. She's not, and the times when we do get a call from women who might say, well, I've heard I can have visits in open adoption, so, I want a family that I could see my baby twice a month with. Well, then we explain to her, that's not very common. That's actually not really an open adoption. That sounds more like a joint custody or someone's helping you raise your baby. And in those times, adoption may not be the best fit for what she's looking for. And that's okay. But to educate her about what open adoption is, what it can offer her, sometimes, when we explain it, she'll even say, yeah, actually I get that because I wouldn't want it to be confusing for my child. And so, I would want them to be mom and dad. And that is another reason to talk about. Here's a great picture I wanted to bring up, Heather, and this is a good time to talk about this subject. Another part of a birth mother's choice is how things go when her baby's born. So when we're talking about newborn adoptions, that she actually will ask us, can they be there with my baby at the hospital? Can they leave the hospital with my baby? Because she's already recognizing you in her mind as this baby's parents.
Definitely. In fact, Libby, on that note, we just got a great question in. And, I typed an answer to the wrong person. Sorry about that. Wendy just asked, who usually names the baby? And I just told her, I love that question. this is so good, and this is so good to know if you're in the process of adopting, because you never want to make the baby's name a make or break issue. In the hospital, the birth mother has the opportunity to name the baby. She can name that baby anything she wants to. She can name that baby the name you think is the most hideous name ever known to man. She can do that. And the baby's original birth certificate will have that name on there. When your adoption is processed and complete, a new birth certificate is created. That birth certificate, I would assume, will have the child's name as your last name. I mean, your last name is the child's last name, because usually that's what we do in families. But it will also have the name you choose for your child. So a lot of times birth mothers will say, well, I'd really like to name the baby, and then the adoptive family says, nope, we've already had a name picked out. We've had this name picked out for the 3 years we've been, doing infertility and doing adoption, and this is the name we want. That's a make or break issue. Don't ever make it a make or break issue, because many times the birth mother will respect that you have that opportunity to rename the child. Sometimes, it's so funny, Libby and I both have seen this happen. Sometimes the birth mother says, well, I really want to name, I'd like to participate in naming the child, and this is the name I like. We call the family, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's like on our list of names. We love that name. And it's like, easy.
Yeah.
And sometimes,
to talk with her too, because sometimes there are reasons she has. Sometimes she wants to hand down a little piece of herself or her family, and that once she shares her reasons for having that name in mind, you might actually come to love it more than anything you could have dreamed of yourself.
Yes.
And that you could choose to keep part or all of it, or to collaborate. Lately I'm hearing from a lot of matches where it is more that first scenario you described, where she might say, what names are you thinking of for the baby? And then you share your thoughts, and she says, that's totally what I was thinking, or I've always loved that name. So it's a topic you don't have to be afraid of, to talk about that, because again, that all gets down to really customizing and personalizing this open adoption you are starting. And if something comes up at the last minute and the nurse asks her, can you fill out this birth certificate, and she writes down something you never even heard her talk about before, again, like Heather said, just roll with it. And then again, I would still encourage you to not react so much in shock, maybe a little bit like, oh, that's different than you mentioned, but to ask her, what made you choose that?
Talk about it.
Yeah. What made you put that name down? And she might say, I know we talked about Fred or whatever, but my grandfather's name, he just died last week, and I just really want this little boy to have his name. And, maybe it's something that she didn't feel comfortable talking to you about then. You just never know. It's worth finding out, but it is not something to freak out over. Another question that we sometimes get is, will she know our last names? So on the topic of names. And the reason I bring this up is because it brings to mind this story of one of my first adoptions here at Lifetime, where it was adoptive parents. They had been matched with this birth mother for a couple months, so it was a good amount of time when they were getting to know each other. And they had talked about all kinds of things. They'd even visited while she was pregnant, and then they came back for the birth. And in the moments when she was in labor, when this birth mother was in labor, there's so many emotions happening. She's not only going through the natural hormones and the emotions of just giving birth and being in labor, but she's also got this pending adoption on the other side of it. And so things are high. She's thinking about a lot. And she tells the nurse, I don't know how I can do this. I don't even know their last names. How do I trust these people? Well, we come to find out that they had been under some assumption that they had to keep all of this like on lockdown and super secret. And you have to remember, it's one birth mother who knows who you are. It's not 14. It's not 100 women out there who know who you are. So by the time you know her, you're going to build a trust with her, and most people just naturally get to this place of sharing information with each other because you know you can trust her with it. But this family had thought, we just can't, like it's against the rules kind of mindset, like we can't. Well, when the nurse came out and said, look, she's freaking out, and this is what she's telling me, the adopted mom, she told me later the story, I heard this from the adopted mother, she ran into that delivery room and said, I will tell you anything you want to know, because she wanted this adoption to happen, and she just thought she was following rules. Like, it wasn't something she was holding back. It was just she thought it was supposed to be like that. So this birth mother felt this huge sense of relief because she just got to know them. And it's not even like she was Googling on her phone, you know, well, who are you? And now I want to, like, pull up any article you've ever been in or anything. It was just having the freedom to know who adopts your baby. And really there was no other hitch after that. She just wanted to know their last name. And so for you it may be something else. Like, you know, we get a lot of questions, should I share my cell phone number so we can text? Yes. I mean, worst case scenario, if for some reason she's phone bombing you and just texting all the time and it's somehow obtrusive, you could change your number if needed and deal with that situation through the adoption professional that helped you. But that's not very common. You can look at these photos on the screen. You know, this one photo on the left here, this just happened this summer. You know, this birth mother chose these adoptive parents for her little boy, and here they are getting together, I believe before they left town to go home with him. And they're casual, they're comfortable together. You know, they're all smiling, you know, except for older sister who's not thrilled. But right. Birth mom's holding this baby, and she's not feeling like, oh gosh, I've held this baby now. Am I sure I can do this? She's holding this baby because, hey, they trust me, and we all love this baby. Right. You know, another example, well, I was going to share, Heather, another example I've heard several times. You know, you want to think about why open adoption? What are the benefits? I have heard so many times from birth mothers in hindsight who said that first visit after their baby was born was so reaffirming to them, was so validating. It gave them so much confirmation that they had done the right thing for their child when they got to see that child at either a few months old or a year old or 2 years old, whenever that first visit happened, because they saw, my baby's healthy. My baby's actually kind of laughing with them. And they enjoy my baby, and things are going the way I hoped they would. And so it gets to get rid of that fear, that nervousness that she has about, did I do the right thing? Is my baby okay? And you're giving her that peace of mind by being open to letting her see into your life after the adoption too.
Definitely. And, you know, what I was going to say, Libby, is just a, you know, when you're talking about sharing a last name, sharing a cell phone number, you know, we're asking and we're hoping and we're praying that a birth mother will share with us truly the most valuable thing she can. You know, most people, you know, the one thing they will not give up is their family, be it their kids, their spouse, even their dog. You know, that's the one thing. You can take everything else. Don't take my kids. Yet we're asking and we're hoping that a birth mother entrusts us with the one thing that we're not willing to release. So,
you know, piggyback question to this, Heather, just because we kind of touched on this, you know, just discipline or vaccinations. And this question, thank you, Amanda, said, do discipline issues get discussed as a result of open adoption? I would say I usually encourage a birth mom, if she has those questions, to just ask during the match. You know, I would say most, especially new parents, but even parents of younger children, maybe even babies, when they're thinking about discipline, I got to say, most parents probably kind of change along the way as your child shows different needs for different kinds of discipline and different methods. So sometimes it's hard to, black and white lay out, this is how we plan to discipline our child, because
But I will say,
sometimes,
part of the home study process is discussing your discipline methods with you.
true.
So the
You've
cool
already
thing
thought
about it, is if birth mother asks, you and your husband have already at least expressed to the home study provider what you plan to do. So you probably are ready to express to a birth mother, at least regurgitate what you told the home study provider. So it's something that, I think this is a good question, but it's not something that I have heard really being shared a lot with or being asked a lot with. Usually the biggest issue, and I wanted to get to this, not the biggest issue, the biggest question, the biggest thing we have to work out and agree upon in an open adoption relationship is the contact. What does our relationship look like a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now?
Well, and we had a great question on that, Heather, that was asking, what happens if what you agreed on, if she contacts you after the adoption and says she wants contact to go differently than you had agreed while you were matched together?
I think the initial thing, and I'll just share briefly at Lifetime what we do, our families have a preference. Are you open to letters and pictures? Are you open to visits? Are you not open to contact? Which we can't help families who aren't open to contact. But anyway, that's so there's different levels of contact. And when we're doing an intake on a birth mom, we ask, what are you looking for? Many times they say, gosh, I have no idea. I mean, I really think it'll depend on the relationship I build with the family. And when that happens, we want to present families who are at the most open level. Because if she meets them, really clicks with them and wants visits, they need to be open to that. We don't want a situation where she meets them and clicks with them and wants visits, and the family says, oh, no, we were only open to letters and pictures. So initially, there's some screening there to kind of give her choices of families who are looking for something similar or very open, like she might be. And then second to that is we encourage the family and the birth mom to talk about, okay, what does it look like? Do you want to visit once a year? Do you want to visit twice a year? Do we want to be Facebook friends? Do we want to send updates through snail mail, through email? Are you comfortable giving her your cell phone number? I mean, now with technology, really the choices are endless. I mean, 5 years ago, FaceTime was not something everybody had in their pocket on their iPhone. Now it is.
Right.
So the traditional letters and pictures is pretty rare because technology affords us so much more. So the question, Libby, that you asked about when birth mom wants more than was agreed to. My guess is somebody might be asking this because they wouldn't be comfortable with it. Obviously, if you are, if it's somebody you had a great relationship with and you had a visit once a year and she says, hey, could we get together twice a year? I really enjoy our visits. And you as adoptive parents feel like you enjoy your visits, that wouldn't be an issue. But it can be an issue when, you're feeling like you want to have a little more control in that situation. First off, I would say try to work it out. If you can't, go to your adoption professional that you use. They might be able to help you work it out and mediate a little bit. One thing that's really important.
Well, I just wanted to add in there, too, again, kind of going back to what we talked about with the whole naming the baby. You might ask her what's changed.
Right.
Why is this request coming now? And she might have a reason that she just sort of, most of us don't communicate clearly, especially on familiar terms. So it's always good practice to ask why or what makes you say that, because then you're not reacting to a hypothetical, you're just then reacting to the information that's known. And so to say to her, what's changed or what brings this up? And then if she says, actually, I found out that my family is going to be in the area and I just thought maybe we could meet for coffee. And suddenly now it might be, oh, well, it's just now we don't have to put so much effort into this visit, so maybe it's not that big a deal to have a second or third visit this year because it just happened to work out. But next year may not be like that. It could be a one-time thing she's thinking, or an occasional thing. Like I worked with a birth mother who was a truck driver, like a cross-state, interstate truck driver, and she was bummed while she was pregnant in the end of her last trimester because she had to stop, and she just loved being on the road. But she chose a family out of state, out of her area where she called home. But the way that they actually get together with visits is when she rolls through town on a delivery, she will email them or text them and say, hey, I know I'm going to be in town next Wednesday. You want to meet up for dinner or something? And if they're available, yeah. If they're not, sorry, we might miss you this time. So it's not something that happens all the time, but it's also, this is the second point that was on my heart was, you know, just like if Heather called me up and said, do you want to get lunch today? If I'm not available, you know, I'm going to tell her, well, actually, I'm not available. If you want to set something up in the future where I can get you on the calendar, great. You know, or if you know, a lot of us have plans that we know ahead of time, even months in advance sometimes. And if that birth mother's saying, well, I was hoping we could get together for Thanksgiving, and you know you're going to be in Europe for Thanksgiving or something, you just tell her, I'm not available then. You're not locked into having to obey and be flexible on every wish and request. She's probably just throwing those out there because somebody's got to initiate the plan.
And I also think it's good, you know, Libby, you said something very valuable. It's good to not, number one, not freak out, and number two, not assume that this is something that does need to be negotiated or it's not, it doesn't have to be a big thing if you don't let it. It probably, in most cases, it's that she loves you so much and she so enjoys seeing you with her child that she just wants a little more of it. That's all. She's not wanting to exert more control because you're mom and dad. She just probably has had such a good, she may also be struggling at this point. She may be, we've worked with birth moms who placed a child, then got married and couldn't get pregnant again. Only child they ever had is the one they placed. We've worked with women who've had a personal loss. Perhaps her mother died and she's feeling a little bit of a longing to put her arms around her birth child again. So, like I said, don't ever assume that something's wrong. You know, it's good, like we say, to ask what's going on. Now, I was going to say there's something very, 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 very important to know with open adoption, and that is this. So say you've agreed to have an open adoption. You've agreed to have once-a-year visits, and she has your text number, so she can text you whenever she wants, okay? You start getting kind of bizarre texts right before your visit. You get together for your visit, and you can tell that she's high, and you notice she's got track marks up and down her arms. This is every adoptive parent's worst fear in an ongoing relationship.
Right. Even if she was clean during her pregnancy, even if there was no effect on her baby, she could have fallen into habits or gone back to old habits or whatever.
And what you can do at that time is that's a great place to start setting gentle boundaries. The same gentle boundaries you might set with your sibling if he was doing the same thing, or a friend. You know, I care about you, but I can see that you're using drugs. And as long as you're doing that, this really isn't a safe place for our visit. I would hate for your child to see you like this. I can see you're out of control. You know, what's going on? What's gotten you here? You know, we can resume visits once you're clean. You know, I'm going to go ahead and block your number from my cell phone for 30 days because you're sending me really bizarre and inappropriate things. I don't, I support you in trying to find some recovery. Here's a couple recovery resources I looked up online, but this is not a safe environment for us or for your child to participate in with you. It's always okay to set boundaries when the situation becomes unhealthy.
Right.
And that's
again, something you can contact, even if it's after the adoption.
Definitely.
And if you're on the call tonight and you're researching professionals that you want to help you adopt, ask them, what kind of support and availability do you have to meet after my adoption? Let's say a year after, or 2 years, or 5 years after, if I have a question about how to navigate a situation with my child's birth mother, or how to reach her, or whatever comes to mind, whatever may come up, or maybe even court support, or whatever it is that your adoption needs, that you have questions about, ask them, are you still there for me? Because not all professionals are, but that's a priority to us, is because we worked with you. We were familiar with her and her situation, and knowing what you know on the other side of the adoption once it's completed helps us better support her too. Sometimes I'll get calls right after the adoption, and you might know before I do that she's needing counseling and having a hard time, when maybe when I talked to her last, she said, I don't want to talk with a counselor, I actually feel really good. So you can always communicate back and get her the help she needs too, but also to keep us in the loop, so that if she's calling us and saying, they said that they won't come meet me and they told me that they would, and so I don't know why they're backing out, for us to know, okay, well, I already heard from Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, and they said that she's been getting high regularly and they're getting bizarre texts, then we're able to gently and professionally talk with her about, as I understand the situation, it sounds like things have changed a little bit with you and your life choices, so what's going on there? And bring her a little bit of accountability into what she agreed on, what she created from the start. And in that, Libby, you mentioned something important. You said, for those of you on the call who are researching adoption professionals, ask if they're there for you. Also ask if they're there for the birth mom, and if they're there, very specifically, to negotiate anything that may come up in the future. Lifetime, we do get calls from birth mothers who have placed through other organizations. And Libby and I have both called some of those organizations and said, we got a call from this gal. You may want to, do what you can, because she's calling us and we don't know who she is, and you did the adoption. Many of them have told us that we don't have any services after the adoption. Once it's done, our services are complete. At Lifetime, our services are for a lifetime. We help and support her for her lifetime. That will morph and change as we get further from the adoption, but we're always here for her. And the same for you. We're always here for you. But that's very important, especially when you are looking at open adoption, because you don't want to get 12 years from now and suddenly realize we need fill in the blank. We need help. Right.
Our son is saying he wants to go live with with his birth mom. What do? Call us. We'll help you. We can see if we can direct you to some groups in your area. We may not be able to if none exist, but we can tell you, we can give you other families' experiences. Some of the best things have come when families ask us a question that literally stumps us all. We will post it on our Facebook, find a few people who are having the same situation, and guess what? We give you the resources. You start your own online support group for whatever it is. Because we do have a lot of connections in the adoption community. And it's just one of those things that sometimes, if nothing else, it helps to have someone to talk it through with and to find somebody who's going through the same thing.
Right. And I brought up this slide here, too, because that was, I just want to backtrack a little. We are so grateful for all of your participation on this webinar, because it's been great to just see you chime in with comments, but also to ask questions, maybe to get a little bit more detail. But as you're hearing all of these stories and examples and explanations, it leads me to this slide here, where it's an image of a birth mother and her child at the hospital during her stay, so he was newly born. And a question sometimes we get is, okay, so she gets to choose us, and she feels at peace about her decision because it was up to her how the adoption happened. Why does she need updates too? And I think that everything we've been talking about really answers that. But the bottom line is that she's still this baby's mother. And so even though you may be the mother and the father who change those diapers and do the feedings and choose the schools and talk with teachers and help with homework and, do the timeouts because they back talk and clean off the muddy feet and wipe the scrapes, she will never forget this child. Nothing. No. She's facing this choice. She's facing this situation. None of her options are going to ever make it as if this child didn't exist. Mm-hmm. And so she has to make a choice in her child's future, but also in her own, because someday she may go on to maybe get married or have another child or graduate college or do something, and she doesn't want to walk through her life wondering, is it okay to remember this really major decision I made in my life and this important person that's out there that came from me, that I know? Because a lot of times these women say, I'm not sure I could do adoption. I don't know how I would live knowing that my child is just out there somewhere. Well, these days open adoption lets her know her child's not just somewhere. Her child lives in East Nebraska with a loving mom and dad in a 3-bedroom home with 2 dogs and grandparents that lived a block away and a church that they go to every Sunday. Like, she knows. And so in this moment when she's loving her son, she's loving her daughter, and she's thinking about, am I going to keep moving forward? You can see the smile on this woman's face. She loves this baby. And I think she even told the adoptive mom that she was surprised how much she felt like a mother just even in those couple days with him in the hospital. That she kind of thought, I had chosen adoption. I thought that it would just be, I had this baby for you because I felt so good about doing this with this specific adoptive family. But in those moments, she realized just how much love she had for this baby, even though she hadn't spent very much time with him. And you don't want to ask her to give that up. You don't want to ask her to just act like it never happened. And so open adoption not only benefits you and your child, and you get information about health backgrounds and family history, her pregnancy health, and even little things like if she's talented in music, or if she's a math whiz, or if she hates mushrooms or is allergic to chocolate. Sometimes those things will help you as your child grows up. But she also gets to walk around knowing that these people didn't use me for my baby. These people cared about me, and they are just going to love my baby. My baby's going to grow up to be accepted, and they're going to be proud of their story because this family is going to be honest with them about me and my role in their family coming together and who I am. And she won't have this fear of, what if I get a knock on my door 18, 20, 25 years, 30 years later, and I don't recognize this person on the other side of the screen door, and I never knew they were coming. She's going to know. Go ahead, Libby. Well, she's just going to know, just like that child will grow up knowing and not have that conversation on his 18th birthday of, by the way, we never told you. So,
well, and what it does, too, is so a lot of, I'm going to go back to hit on one of the myths. A lot of people think it's easier to have a closed adoption because you don't have to deal with a birth mother. But what you gain, which is everything we've talked about tonight, is also in what you lose. You lose that fear of your child getting to 18, like Libby was saying, and turning it around and sitting down with you and saying, okay, Mom and Dad, I want to go find my real parents. And that fear of, oh my gosh, our son's going to go find his real parents. And he goes,
Quote,
and guess what? He finds them, and they're awesome. They are great. and he loves them, and they have a great relationship. And it turns into a, thanks, Mom and Dad, for all you did. This is my real family. That fear goes away with open adoption. The child knows who his biological family is. He knows who Mom and Dad are. His biological parents can be great people, but he's grounded because he knows who everybody is. There's no great, wonderful prize for getting to know them. There's no missing relationship. It's all right there. A short story. My college roommate was adopted. When we were in college together, we were roommates when she turned 21, and the adoption agency, it was a closed adoption, the adoption agency began calling our phone in our dorm room every day, leaving the same message every day. Hi, we're calling from someplace in Indiana. We have this as your phone number we found. Your birth mother would like to get in touch with you. We're wondering if you're open to that. Every day. And I finally said, Carrie, call them back. She said, I don't know what to say. I said, well, tell them not right now. She said, well, I'm afraid. I'm afraid if I say not right now, she'll go away and I'll never find out. I'm afraid if she'll say yes, then they'll start calling me every day. It was a difficult time for her, and we talked hours about all this. This was nothing she wanted. She hadn't reached out to them. She hadn't pursued them. They found her. Well, a few years later, she was getting married, and she had spoken via letters, just letters to her birth mother, and decided, you know what, before I get married, I want to talk to her on the phone. I want to find out some about my medical history, because she wanted to get married and have a baby real quick. So they spoke on the phone, and it was extremely difficult for my roommate because her birth mom wanted to come to her wedding. Well, she didn't know how her adoptive mom was going to feel about that. She didn't know how she felt about that. She'd never met her. And then her birth mom said, well, I'm hoping you can help me. I have 2 teenage children I've never told about you. I never told them that I placed you for adoption. Can you figure out a way to help me do that? And she was like, yeah, no, So it was just a lot. It was a lot emotionally on her. Now, 20 years past that, they are in complete reunion. She actually visited her birth mother and attended her birth mother's wedding. But it's not anything, you don't have to worry about these things with open adoption. You don't have to worry about your child being in angst in their 20s about how you will feel if they want to go and learn more about their heritage. They won't have to be worrying about what's appropriate and not appropriate as they themselves choose to walk down the aisle. Again, it's just more people to love our kids.
Well, and we've had a couple questions, Heather, that came in about the birth father. And I actually got an email earlier this week saying, so often we're talking about these birth mothers and the adoption stories, and, I would just love to know more about birth fathers. And more we're seeing birth father involvement. And so everything that we're talking about with birth mother could also apply to birth father in an open adoption. And if that's a concern of yours, like we had a comment that just said, my biggest fear is that he will show up after placement and claim his child. But in open adoption, like we talked about earlier, just like any adoption, there is a time in which he would have to come forward and say, I don't want this adoption to take place. And if that time has lapsed, he doesn't get to just come in and disrupt everything. And, this isn't really related specifically to open adoption, but, part of what we do at Lifetime is also help these birth mothers. We try and understand their situation with respect to the baby's biological father, too. And if he's involved, if he's around, how he feels about adoption, and if she needs legal support or advice before involving adoptive parents, she will get that support, too. So by the time she talks to you, usually you have that information and you don't have to worry about that. But if he wants to be involved, let him be involved in your open adoption. Because definitely he should also know that he gets a say. And while we talk so much about how adoption has changed for the mothers, now we're kind of coming into a climate, into a season now where we're having to also educate people about how adoption has changed for the fathers, because he's been given sometimes even less say, or assumed that there was less say available to him. But when he knows that he can also get to know the adoptive parents and that he can get those updates, you know, that photo from the beginning where we saw Jake and Tanya with their children and those two birth mothers, in one of those adoptions, the birth father is actually involved. Now, he's not still together with that birth mother, and so they're not involved jointly in this adoption, but he has a unique relationship, particularly with the adoptive father. So, you know, time to time, he'll get photos and updates. So don't be afraid of the potential that could be there, because really it's going to make your process smoother if you're open to letting him in, or birth grandma, you know, or birth auntie, or, you know, whoever it may be. There are more people in this child's life than just that birth mother, but every adoption, in particular, every open adoption is so unique and so just precious, how it unfolds this relationship that you never imagined, but suddenly can't imagine your life without.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to phrase it. And just so you know, I think we were asked how often do birth fathers participate. It's not very common that they want their own individual updates, but it does happen. And like Libby said, if they want to, by all means, it's more information you can garner from for your child. You know, and I know one of the questions we got a little earlier, Libby, that I don't think we addressed, and it's rather brief. That is, is it very common for the contact to decrease over time? And I know that with a lot of the situations I've seen, that can be very common. And it can be very common because the birth mother has the peace in her heart about where her child is and who's raising her child, and she knows that she's welcome. She knows that you care about her. She knows that she can call you or email you anytime and say, "Hey, how's it going? Can I see a picture of you guys?" You know, and so it is common for that to decrease. Again, it's not going to decrease usually in a situation where, you know, she has to remind you every year to send her annual pictures on your child's birthday. That's probably not. But in a situation that there has been a lot of acceptance, and she knows you and you know her, it is very common for that contact to kind of dwindle off because she goes on with her life, which ultimately is what you want for her and is also what she wants for herself as well. I just want to thank all of you for all of your questions, because in particular what was on our hearts in sharing this message and preparing these questions and talking about some of these common questions that we hear about open adoption specifically is because we know that sometimes it feels a little sticky to ask. You know, if there's a question on your mind and you're thinking, oh, I feel awful even thinking it, let alone letting it out to ask anyway. Because definitely, chances are that we've heard it or someone in our office has heard it, and the most important thing is to get answers, because fears are usually based off of assumptions or misinformation or outdated information. So if you're unsure, if you need clarity, ask. Reach out to us. You can call any of us at Lifetime 1-800-923-6784. If you're working with a coordinator, you can talk with her. You know, I would say a lot of you on the call tonight, I loved, we had one comment earlier, Heather, that said, sometimes I get so focused on the waiting that I forget to think about all of these possible situations. And sometimes it gets easy, I think, in those early steps of adoption planning where you're getting all of the paperwork together and your home study completed and applying to different places to see what's the best fit for you. You start focusing on those steps, but there's this huge major step where you get chosen by a birth mother
that you do need to think about. And you need to think about after the adoption too. So I'm so glad to see all of you chiming in, sharing your comments, your questions, your experiences. And for those of you on the call who had questions not related to what we were on topic with tonight, we were trying to get you information. I see Heather was so busy typing with you, but also reach out to us. You can email us at adopt@lifetimeadoption.com. You can even chat live with us on lifetimeadoption.com. You can message us or join in conversation on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/open.adoption. And again, you can always call. We're happy to hear from you. And I just hope that you maybe learned something or just felt reassured by something tonight, because I want to say what a blessing it is to read all of you who commented on how you actually hope for an open adoption, that you're looking forward to having an open adoption, and that you hope you're chosen by a birth mother who wants to have an ongoing relationship. And it's just amazing to see what's changed with adoption and just how it can just be a blessing to everyone involved and how it can benefit your life, that it's not just about adding a child, but now you're adding this other person you never even knew you would care about. But it's normal to have questions and to be unsure, because right now she's a stranger. This birth mother, that child, they're unknown to you. So just keep moving forward, ask questions, get more research, get more clarity. If a hypothetical situation comes to mind and you think, but what about this? I could not do this. Or what about this? I've heard this could happen. Reach out. Share that with us. We might be able to poke holes in it or get you more insight, or just be able to tell you, that just doesn't even happen. You don't even need to worry about that. And Heather, you and I have seen on TV, even as recent as this year, people still say wrong things about adoption and the adoption process. So then other people hear that and they think, oh my gosh, I didn't know it could go like that. If it surprises you or makes you uncertain, find out from people who are doing it every day. Don't just take a newscaster or some random person on a reality show or, even your neighbor's best friend's daughter. Find out from people who are touching adoptions every day and get facts. Listen to people who are living with open adoption and get the details that you need so that you can decide what's right for your family, so that you can decide what adoption is going to look like for you. And then you could communicate that and be chosen by a birth mother who's on the same page.
Yes, definitely.
So, Heather, is there anything you want to add before we wrap up tonight?
No, I don't think so. This has been a great call.
Yes, I love webinars because you get to participate, and if you haven't yet subscribed, you can go to adoptionteleconference.com and put in your email so that you're among the first to find out when we have more of these live calls. And then, of course, just please keep in touch with us. Write to your coordinator at Lifetime and let her know what you thought about tonight's webinar, or reach out and email or call us and find out how we can help you with the next step. So I look forward to meeting with all of you again soon. And Heather, I want to thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's fun.
And I just most importantly want to thank all of you hopeful parents in the audience for joining us tonight, and I look forward to meeting with all of you again soon. Have a great evening, everyone. Good night.